Welcome to the latest Watercolors Aquarium Gallery podcast, brought to you from the Aquarium Studios in downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today we have like this live studio audience here. It's really cool.
It's funny that when somebody agrees to make drinks, everybody sticks around.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's all right. We love them here.
We are we're making light of this one because today what we're doing is we're making light of a lot of aquarium things and a lot of things people come into the shop and say. And so it is one of our famous top 5 lists. And today it's our top 5 aquarium myths.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one because I feel like these are all going to be things we could do an entire podcast on. So we're going to have to be disciplined. That's difficult.
I think, one of the fun things that we do when we do the top 5 lists is we don't necessarily, first of all, we don't talk about the lists. So there's going to be some repeats. But we also all have a slightly different interpretation of, okay, what do we mean by that aquarium myths?
Yeah, so I went into this making a list of top 5 misconceptions that I'm tired of having conversations about.
Mine are a little bit more like what do I wish that everybody who walked in the door understood? Like, it's a bit of a different angle.
I just went for the ones I thought I had the best stories for.
That's a good way to go, too.
Cue the Benny Hill music or something.
So how do we get into it?
How do we get it? Well, I think we get into it the way we always get into it. I'm going to keep this one really light, by the way.
Okay.
So, that means that I should be going last all the time.
I'm just interrupting real quick because I can feel my OCD kicking in. I got to get the clicky things away from me.
Oh, yeah. I've got clicky things in my hands, too.
Because I saw them and immediately realized what I was going to do.
All right. Everybody put their pens in the cup.
Yeah. All right. Thank you,
Pens are in
guys.
the cup. All right, there we go. So, hey, let's just get right into it because I have a feeling we could drag this one out as long as we wanted to. And
yeah, it could be 15 hours because we're doing an hour on each one of our...
This is the top 5 marathon.
That'd be pretty fun.
And our first 24-hour podcast.
Well, I think I've got a pretty fun one to get started with.
Right.
And this is one that, it's sort of like overarching for what I want so many people to understand about keeping aquariums. And my number one misconception was that fish are a consolation prize pet.
Oh, I love it.
As in, well, hamsters are stinky, dogs are a lot of work. They'll probably be happy with a fish. And it's always for like a kid or something like that. Like, be excited about it. It's so much more fun than that.
This is what we're stuck with.
Yeah. And like so many people come in with that perception and they're pretty much just as sociable, entertaining, easy to train, easy to feed, fun to interact with as any other small animal that I could think of.
You just can't pet them. Well, some
Yeah,
of them you
some
can.
of them you can. If that's what you want, then get the fish that you want. But don't chuck a freezing cold betta in your kid's room and expect it to be entertaining him every day.
Right. I think so. So sometimes people come in with that attitude, but they also come in with at least I can get a fish.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But be excited about it. It's fun. It's supposed to be fun. Don't do it just because you can't do anything else. Do it because you get to, even if you can't do anything else.
I think that's the right way to say it, because you get to.
Yeah.
Yep, not because you're stuck with it.
So that's my short and sweet
I like it.
way to start off this conversation.
Good and short and sweet.
I'm going to start off with carbon.
Good. Did you put it down?
No, I did not.
I am fully of the opinion, and I'm not sure how, I think at this table I probably have the strongest opinion on carbon. I think carbon is about 20 years outdated, and we really, my opinion is if you need carbon, something horribly wrong happened. I don't think carbon should ever be in a consistent maintenance schedule. I think it's only necessary when you need to fix specific situations. Like, oh, I have copper in my system, or, oh, my whatever maintenance schedule is off and my water is murky, so I need to pull out whatever's suspended in it. And it's those are things that I think, as long as you plan ahead well enough, shouldn't happen.
I see where you're getting with that, and a 94% 94% agree with you. And the only spot that I sort of disagree is I see value in carbon on tanks that have been going for a while, or tanks that you use a significant amount of driftwood in and you want that crystal clear water.
Yeah, but there are better things to pull it out, like polyfilters that won't pull out a lot of the other stuff that you like in your tank.
And Purigen too.
Yeah.
Purigen, I would agree with. Polyfilters pull out amazing stuff, and I love them, but I don't think they have the let's make the water that amazing crystal clear that carbon can do. Carbon does that better than anything. And you know me, I'm like anti-carbon. Like, get the carbon out of your tank. What do you mean there's carbon in that? Get that out of the tank.
I think you guys are arguing the same point in different ways. Like,
That's why I went 94% agree.
Because in Charles's mind, like, a little bit of clarity or poor clarity isn't an emergency issue. It's just there's something stirred up in the water. And for some people, they do want their tank to be that crystal. But I've never really had an issue with
if you're
clarity.
photographing a tank for a competition,
Yeah.
that water needs to almost look like it's not there. And I think the best way to get that is with the limited and careful use of carbon.
See, that just means you agree with me 100% because that's not typical maintenance. That's extenuating circumstances.
Exactly. That's why I was at 94%.
Yeah.
But see, I wouldn't go to... You started out with horribly wrong. And I would say there are some situations... And let's try it. Let's pick one of our tanks downstairs.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, none of our tanks have carbon in them. We don't use it.
Yeah.
But let's pick one. And we'll put my white paper test to the test. Mm-hmm. So that's what I tell people when they come in the shop and say, hey, I want carbon for my tank. And I tell them, okay, this is what you need carbon for, and this is what you don't. If you want that crystal clear water, tape a piece of carbon to the short side of your tank. Look
Piece
through
of paper.
the tank. Take, what did I say?
You said
Carbon.
a piece of carbon.
Tape.
Technically, it is
all right.
carbon.
I knew that was coming.
Dang it. All right, tape a white piece of paper to the short side of your tank and look through it long ways. If that piece of paper looks white, carbon is not going to do a thing for you. If that piece of paper looks yellowish, and you do water changes and you have proper tank maintenance, I still think you can get a slow, gradual yellowing of an aquarium. Then put carbon in your filter for about 2 to 3 weeks, no longer, and then pull it out.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, carbon isn't worth it for the extra clarity just because
You don't need that
I don't
carbon.
need it,
No.
but also it'll pull out things that I want to stay in there. Whereas, like I mentioned, the polyfilter, it won't pull out the things that carbon can and will pull out.
Right.
And so I'm just like, I just personally, that extra, like, it's definitely better,
Yeah.
but it's just not worth it to me.
I
Yeah.
hear you. Yeah,
Yeah. I
Like
think what we can
94%.
all agree on is that I've never heard a good argument for long-term use of carbon, like continual use of carbon, other than it says so on the filter box. Right. Like, that's the only argument I've ever heard.
And so many filters come with carbon in them. Like, I should say almost all filters come with carbon. Mm-hmm. But if you have a cartridge filter, you don't have a choice but to have carbon in your tank.
Yeah. I mean, at least they tell you to change it out every month, which you need to if you have carbon that's been in your tank for more than a month, throw it away now.
Yeah,
This is your cue.
It's not doing anything. And one of the theories on hole in the head lateral line erosion, by the way, that's another podcast. One of the theories is the breaking down of the fibers of carbon clog the lateral line. Only one of the theories, because we don't know exactly what causes it yet. We do know that carbon can be a cause and probably one of the most popular causes. Mm-hmm. But exactly how the carbon is causing it, we don't know that for sure.
I'm just like dancing my eyebrows a little bit because I'm like keeping it a little close to the chest because I'm saving it for when it's worthwhile. I've been doing a lot of reading on this.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
That's not for this podcast. That's another story.
We should, and I think we will do an entire podcast on carbon.
Might as well.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
Cool.
For sure. I definitely do not disagree with that being one of the biggest myths of the aquarium hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'm going with what I think is the biggest, most common myth in the aquarium hobby that people think, even outside the hobby, think is the real thing. And we're going to get eye rolls on this one, right? And that is fish grow to the size of their tank.
Ugh.
I didn't put that on my list because I knew someone else would.
I debated as to whether I wanted to be number one or not, but I'm like, you know what? Let's dive into that one right away.
My response every time I get that in the store is, well, if you stick a kid in the closet, is that going to slow him down? Like,
Is that going to slow his growth? The answer is yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
it will look sickly and terrible and probably have issues for the rest of his life. You know, like that pleco we've got
like Lumpy.
downstairs.
yeah,
Right.
same
Right.
principle.
Okay, so there's two places actually where that myth comes from. And one of them is the obvious one that we're talking about here, right? And that's if you put a fish in a tank that's too small, it's going to continue to grow and it's going to produce more waste and it's going to produce an unhealthy situation and that will stunt the fish's growth. And that is true that you can stunt a fish's growth by keeping it in an unhealthy environment. That's one of the places that myth comes from. And I have heard of and seen 12-year-old goldfish that were 2.5 inches long in a 1.5 gallon tank.
And I've also heard of 12-inch goldfish in a 29-gallon tank.
Yeah, because they did tons of water changes.
Yeah.
Because they kept them healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's still stunted.
It's still stunted, yes. I grew Oscars up when I was in college to 9.5 inches, 2 of them together in a 12-gallon tank.
Ooh, we might have to come back to that on my
know.
next misconception.
Oh no,
I'm not saying that was healthy. I'm not saying that was good. I didn't know anything then.
I do
and
not
thought it was
condone
good.
this.
I do not
but,
condone this behavior, but I did it. Yeah.
Live and learn from our mistakes, audience.
Yeah. It's almost as if that's what led you here because you realized that didn't work very well.
Exactly. But the other source of that myth has to do with raising certain types of fish. And it is noted that plecos, for example, baby plecos can produce a growth inhibiting hormone. So that if baby plecos are in too concentrated of an area, they can reduce the growth ability of their neighbors. And so this growth inhibiting hormone, that myth was perpetuated that, hey, if you just put a whole bunch of fish together that are the same kind, it'll stop them from growing. Well, no, that works with baby bristlenose plecos in a really concentrated area. And so
And why would that be better still? Like, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, tell the story.
It all has to do with out-competing for resources. And in some of the environments that they live in, right, where it's rainy and dry seasons. And so in the dry season, they're going to live in a lot smaller little puddle. Mm-hmm. And so if they produce that hormone that prevents everybody from getting too big, the resources are not quite as limited. When the water fills up, when the rains come, it washes all of those hormones away, and then those plecos can grow again.
It just still seems, in a long term in an aquarium environment, there's no way that keeping them under those conditions wouldn't have other
it's not
issues.
healthy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like
I
it's
see what you're
still,
saying. Yeah, no, it's bad.
Still, why? Even if that's true, why?
Yeah. I had bristlenose plecos spawning in a 10-gallon aquarium about 10 years ago, and they were producing tons of babies. I probably had 50 or 60 babies in that 10-gallon aquarium. And I kept doing some small water changes, not as big of water changes as I could, but I was throwing plenty of food in there, and they just wouldn't grow. So finally, I took a couple of those plecos out, and I put them in a couple of other tanks, and I kept them that way for about a month. And a month later, the ones in the 10-gallon tank, where there were still 30 or 40 of them, were not much bigger. The ones I moved to other tank were 3 times the size.
Wow.
Yep. Other than that, it was very... Now, I realize there's all kinds of scientific flaws in my methodology there.
Just smirking over here. It's okay.
I would be interested to see, and it's never anything I've looked into, because that's a piece of like trade knowledge that I've seen passed around a lot, and I've never heard like a good scientific, like just like something that shows why and the mechanism and all that. Like it makes sense.
Yeah.
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 Anyway.
The classic is, though, the takeaway is, yes, you can stunt a fish's growth if you keep it unhealthy. Ergo, don't keep your fish unhealthy so they grow to the maximum size.
I had that question about a clam the other day.
Really?
Yeah, because we have those Durazas that get decent size. And
Yeah.
he's like, well, does it depend on the size of the tank? Like, really? About a clam? Like, they just are going to do what they do.
That's how perpetuated that myth is.
It is. It's so ingrained in
Yeah.
people.
Yep.
Like, it's one of the first things that people learn.
Yep.
Gross.
Yep.
Well, the second thing that people might have learned, and I wasn't actually picking on you, but it's sort of
I like it.
appropriate to this, is that you can put an inch of fish per gallon in your
Yeah,
tank.
the 1 inch of fish per gallon. I love that one.
And you were saying that, oh, well, I had a 10-inch Oscar in a 10-inch tank, or a 10-gallon tank.
Right.
And that
That's 1
was
inch per
still
gallon.
not appropriate. And not the full size of that fish either.
Up until just a few years ago, some of the big box stores had in their fish departments, how many fish can I put in a tank? Well, 1 inch per gallon. That's the rule.
Mm-hmm.
And it was it was plastered on signs
Yeah.
in their fish departments.
And it's like, it's both giving yourself too much and not giving yourself enough.
Yeah.
Like, a group of 30 neon tetras in a 30-gallon tank, really, that's all you can do? Like, you could probably do more than that just fine. Like, you could do a pair of cichlids, and that would be another 6 inches. You could do, and
Right.
it would be fine. But also, you can't put a 24-inch fish in a 20-gallon tank
Right.
because it won't fit.
Right. Well, and just biomass.
Yeah.
If you just think of a 10-inch Oscar compared to 10 1-inch neon tetras, what's got more mass? That Oscar's got
Yeah.
exponentially more.
Gross.
Was that proper use of the term exponential? I think it is. That's specific,
That's good.
Yeah. An exponentially different number.
Yeah.
It's like you need to calculate the total volume of a fish and then work it into an equation. Because it's like that fish is 10 inches by 5 inches. A neon tetra is 1 inch by like a quarter inch.
Right.
Yeah.
But it comes from, like, how do we get this question, how many fish can I have in my tank? What's the formula? Well,
Like I always try to respond with, and people hate this answer, but it's the only way I can process it in my head is that, like, I've been doing this long enough that I have an idea of what I can handle in a tank because I know my maintenance schedule. I know what I can do.
Right.
So I have like a semi-intuitive sense of like how much mass I can put into a tank of any given size. And I'm kind of like, it depends on your maintenance schedule and what you're comfortable doing. If you want to do 50% water changes a week like I do, you can put a lot in this tank.
Yeah.
If you want to be a little bit more reasonable.
Or if you have a ton of live plants, or if you, there's just so much that
There's
affects that
so many
number. Your
variables.
filtration, your, yeah. And personally, I don't like choosing, like people choose the size of the tank and then try to figure out what they can get away with. Like, choose the fish you want. As long as they fit in your space, choose the tank that fits them well, and then fill it out the way you want to maintain it.
Yeah, my life would be so much easier if people came in knowing what fish they want.
True.
This is so stressful for me.
but they don't, and that's kind of the fun.
Yeah,
It is kind
and
of the
that's fair.
fun.
Yeah.
But like if I'm gonna have a 4-inch fish, I'm not thinking through like how many gallons I need to maintain it, like water chemistry wise. I'm trying to think of like, what's the space it needs? How is this fish gonna live in this space?
Right.
And I keep my tanks. I've got a 64-gallon tank that has 10 fish in it, and the maintenance on that is really easy. I'm sure I'll eventually add more, but basically the rule I use is start with what you love the most and you know can fit, add slowly, test frequently. When your nitrates are getting too high for you too frequently, you can't add any more fish unless you change your maintenance schedule.
Right.
And that's so much simpler to me than trying to just like guess based on some random math that
That's
somebody
the
made
formula,
up.
right? Everybody's looking for that formula. What is
Yeah.
the formula? It's about nitrates. That's
Yeah.
how you measure what you can do.
A tank that stays consistently at 10 nitrates or below has room for more fish. If it's 20 or higher, no more fish unless you do more.
Right.
Or feed less.
The former editor of Tropical Fish Hobbyist magazine had the best story for that. He had a 75-gallon aquarium with 11 full-grown Oscars in the tank, which all of us would look at and go, "Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous!"
Like, oh gosh, I met this guy. Like,
yeah. So how do you do that? By the way, I do not believe his tank was overstocked. He did a 90% water change on that tank every day.
Sorry, I'm just responding to the
Every
studio
day.
audience.
And
It's so good.
when you walk up, so anybody who's ever kept an Oscar or any of those big cichlids that have just amazing personality, and when you walk up to the tank and you see them, they get all excited to see you because they know you're going to feed them.
The wiggle.
And they get that, they look at the surface with that excitement. These fish, according to him, I didn't see it happen, but this is how he described it. When he would walk up with his hose and buckets, not buckets, I'm sure, with his hose, his water change stuff, the fish would look at it and go, yes, 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 it's water change time, and get all excited. And they'd all go to the bottom and lay down. Because he brought the water level down enough that the Oscars had to lay on their side for a little while until he filled it back up. And they loved it.
I so believe it, but because it's Oscars.
I know, right? Can I just comment that I just always love watching people who have not heard your stories respond to them? By the way, it's so good.
That's such a good one.
Yep. Crazy.
But yeah, how many inches of fish was that?
So 10-inch fish. It was 100 inches of fish.
Yeah.
Also, he was overstocked.
He was pretty close to being in the rule. Like, if he had done 3 more, then we wouldn't consider that overstocked. It's just so arbitrary. It makes me so annoyed.
Crazy.
There's no logic in that.
Nope. So what is the formula? Measure your nitrates. Go by your gut. Keep your tank healthy.
And adjust your behavior based on what you see on your tank.
Just
like it.
Be awesome, you know?
If you need advice on that and that seems intimidating to you, I promise that's something that we can do really simply, and we can show you how it's done.
Right.
Yeah. All right. You ready?
We're ready. What you got?
Snails are bad.
Perfect.
Pour one out for all our poor murdered snail buddies.
Right.
Almost every day I get asked, so how do I get rid of snails? And I'm like, why do you want to?
We love snails. They're our friends.
Because I fully believe that Glosso display we have downstairs would not be possible without that snail population, because I cannot get underneath the Glosso.
Right.
The only reason stuff isn't building up underneath there is because there are snails in there.
Yeah.
There's no way for me to vacuum that without disturbing the Glosso.
Snails are so beneficial in so many ways. And even the ones that people consider pests.
Yeah.
Ram's horns and the Malaysian trumpet snails. Those are the two that are always like, oh, I tried bleach. I tried everything to get rid of those snails. I can't get rid of them. They just keep on multiplying. I have so many.
Have you tried feeding less?
Or maybe you overfeed.
Yeah.
I seed Malaysian trumpet snails in all of my planted tanks now because of how well they stir up the substrate and clean up gunk.
Yeah. They're amazing detritivores. They eat dead plant material. They eat everything. They're so cool. And it's like, you can... This is the kind of nerd I am. It's fun for me, especially in a lot of our tanks downstairs, to kind of mess with the feeding regimen and see what it does to the snail population. And they're very reactive to it.
Yeah.
And so it's like the snail populations. So when people come in and they're like, oh, you have snails, in the back of my head, my response is, yeah, and I have exactly the population I want in that tank.
Yeah.
Right.
I tell people that all the time. You always have the number of snails you need. If you want fewer snails, then need fewer snails.
Yeah. Feed
like
less.
the amount of food they're eating. And if you have a crazy algae issue, then yeah, you're going to have the snails that are going to eat that. And it's a diagnostic tool you can use in your aquarium. Like, there's too much stuff in here. Find a way for there to be less stuff.
Right. Feed less.
Feed less. It's always overfeeding.
Yes. Always.
Not always, just almost always.
Yeah, I've definitely seen bad snail outbreaks in tanks like that plants aren't doing well in. So there's a lot of dead leaves and things like that. But no matter what it is, there's a root cause and you can find it and it will tell you something.
There are a couple of species of snails that sometimes show up as pests that will munch on some plants.
True.
Ram's horns and Malaysian trumpet snails are not those snails.
Yeah. And bladder snails are safe, but they're easily confused with pond snails, which can.
Right. The pond snails are the ones that sometimes show up.
Yeah.
I haven't seen one of those in our tanks for like 3 years.
No. Did you? I was wondering if this was triggered by our most recent 5-star review.
Oh, I didn't read that.
Oh, we just got a 5-star review that was, well, I just bought some plants from these guys and there were a bunch of little snail buddies on there and I love snails.
Perfect.
Good.
Thank
Yay.
you.
Somebody who gets it.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I think is really underappreciated. If you have live plants in your tank, unless you do nothing but tissue cultures, you will get snails at some point.
You will get snails.
And even if you're only doing tissue cultures, there is still a possibility because pond snails are capable of getting in on our water.
Really?
Isn't that fun?
In our tap water?
Yeah.
Elaborate.
Notice the silence where I'm like, Charles doesn't usually make stuff up, but this sounds made up.
Yeah, no, they're just like their eggs are capable of like making it through sometimes. I'm not saying it happens frequently because clearly we haven't got them in like 3 years,
Yeah.
but it's a potential thing that happens.
I need to see the documentation for that one.
I'll backtrack it for you.
I know you will. And I'm not doubting you for a minute. Okay, I'm doubting you for a little bit of a minute, but I really want to see the documentation
Yeah.
for it. And we need to publish the documentation for that because that's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Sea snails are amazing. I mean, they're bugs. They're invertebrates. It's like you think it's like being annoyed that there are ants in your house, but it's like being annoyed that there are ants outside. They do a job. They're there for a reason.
We need them.
Yeah, leave them alone. They're doing their thing.
They're just snailing along, guys.
That was a great one,
Want to
Charles.
hear my favorite joke?
This is your favorite joke?
No, my favorite joke.
This is your favorite joke?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I
What
want
did
to hear
the
it.
snail say when it was riding on the tortoise?
What?
Wee.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. Okay, we deserve that.
Yep.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Ben,
wait,
what's your
is it
next?
me?
Faster. I was like, we got to move on faster than that tortoise. Let's go.
Okay, so speaking of really light and somewhat comedic, I'm bringing this one up because I've heard it more than once, and probably once or twice a year, I have somebody come into the store that knows what a discus is and says, I don't want to set up a brackish water tank, so I can't have discus.
Right?
Right.
Well, where did that come from?
That one I have no idea. So a lot of the myths, like we can trace the roots to how did that happen?
Yeah.
That one I got nothing. And it's
I have one idea.
I'd love to hear it.
I think it's kind of like that, like Berenstain Bears things. But I think what
It's
happened
one of
is
those alternate universe theories.
wait, it's one of those. But I think it's what happened is somewhere along the line, someone managed to conflate brackish with black water,
I could see
and
that
then it just spread like
confusion.
wildfire. Because
Yeah.
I only give it any credence because I have seen some weird things where I'm like, where did that come from? And then
Right.
you can backtrack it like 10 years back and it's just some random forum post.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and everyone just glommed onto it.
Anybody wondering, we just have to like get the little disclaimer in here. Discus live in the upper reaches of the Amazon River system in very soft water. What does soft water mean? It means there's almost nothing in it, particularly no salt.
Yeah.
What?
That's just so bizarre. My theory is it was started by a fish store worker who got sick of trying to talk people out of discus and just made something up.
10 out of 10.
I've heard that for like cichlids in general before too. Like I've heard somebody say, "Oh, those are cichlids. Well, I can't do those. Those are brackish." Like a few times. Like where is that even? What? Why?
Does
what?
not compute.
I don't know. That's a great one. I didn't even think about that.
Nope, me neither. But yeah, no,
That's
it does.
so
I do
funny.
get that.
Yeah. Too often. Okay. See, I did a quick one.
Yeah, that was a good quick one.
Thanks.
All right, my next one, I might raise some eyebrows here, but I've
Ooh.
got a good reason for it.
Okay.
And my misconception is multiple aquariums are more work than one aquarium.
Eyebrows raised.
Yeah. But you get so many people in here that are like, I want 2 of these, 1 of these, 3 of these, 6 of these. And I really feel like they'd have so much of an easier time maintaining their tank if they just had 2 or 3.
I see where you're going with that, and
Yeah,
I like it.
I kind of view this is going to be such a weird take. I kind of view aquariums a lot like cats, where it's like if you have one, having 2 or 3 isn't really like okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And but there is that threshold of like okay, yeah, this is clearly too much.
Yeah. But like if you love Harlequin rasboras, neon tetras, and guppies, and you put a group of each one in your 29-gallon tank, and you also love Anais cories, and you really want the albino ones too, and you want salt and peppers, this is all of a sudden like a crazy tank to maintain.
It's gonna look funny.
If you did 3 10-gallons,
Yeah.
it'd take you
It's
about
true.
the same amount of time. You could still do it in 1 bucket. I'm all about those 1 bucket water
One
changes.
bucket water change.
And you would need, the maintenance wouldn't be life or death every single time. It wouldn't be you let it go 2 or 3 weeks and now all of a sudden this is horrible. It would be so much easier.
Yeah, no,
I like where you went with that. That was good.
I'm fully on board with that. As a guy that keeps bettas.
Yeah. It's such a hard sell though, because people are like, well, I can really only get away with 1. You can do 3 10-gallons in the same space as a 29. You just got to do a shelf.
And it'll take about the same amount of time for the water changes.
Yeah.
The only reason I raise my eyebrow is right now at home I have 1 tank and I used to have 62.
Well, just as easy.
The 62 was more work.
Oh, it was.
It was. Yeah.
Right,
Then what?
It's cats.
I'm
It's
getting some looks from the audience here again.
it's like, I mean, 3 cats is about the same amount of work as 1 cat, but 62 cats? Come on.
That's more work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say that my 3 are harder to maintain than are easier to maintain than one of mine. But if you know you want a little bit of everything, I think more people would have more fun if they planned for that.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah,
Has my wheels turned in a little bit?
a little
Come up with
bit.
some good ideas here.
I don't know. You do have 4 identical 20 longs on your.
Yeah, well.
So
Cool.
far, they've been very easy to maintain.
Yeah, that algae's looking really nice over there.
Isn't it, though?
You guys should wait until you see Ben's setup. It's amazing. Just got to get some plants in there now.
Yep.
All right.
Soon.
Simple enough.
You know what is another simple maintenance one that I hear a lot that I'm kind of like, wait, what? If I get a bigger filter, I'll be able to do fewer water changes.
Oh, that's a
Right.
really good one. I love
actually
that.
Yeah, I had filters clean your tank
Yeah.
as mine, and I think it's
It's the same concept.
the same concept.
So we did do a whole episode on filtration, but like, let's walk through the basics again so people understand just like how fully this doesn't make sense.
Right.
So your filter is basically, at least most of the filters, unless you're running some weird chemical filtration. Sorry, Amy's moving and I got distracted.
I got caught on our cords.
So what they're doing is converting fish waste into things that are less toxic. So the nitrogen cycle is, and I guess I'm going to hit 2 birds with 1 stone here. No one, like I get too many questions about the nitrogen cycle. So fish waste is ammonia, and there's a type of nitrifying bacteria that turn that into nitrite, which is still very toxic. And then there's a second bacteria that turns it into nitrate. Your filter is a way for that bacteria to have a nice, happy place to do its thing. So they're not really pulling anything out of the water. They're just converting it into something that your fish can live with.
Yeah. How do you say that just right? Less toxic. Well, it is less toxic. They can live with something not bad. Well, if it's bad, why do we have to pull it out? Well, you still have to pull it out. So wait, how do you say that just right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just say that it's far less toxic, like magnitudes difference.
Yeah.
And it still has a toxicity. It's just, instead of at like 0.25 parts per million, the toxicity is now like 50,
Right.
which is pretty manageable. Like,
But
you-
it can get there if you leave it. It will get there. Particularly
Yes.
if you have a snail overpopulation.
yeah.
What causes
The
that?
code. Oh, he has snail issues.
Ooh. So a larger filter isn't going to speed up or slow down that process beyond the ability of the bacteria to maybe convert it faster.
Yeah.
And once it's done that, you're still accumulating nitrates,
The nitrates are going to be there.
and you're still going to have to do a water change.
Yep. You're not going to grow any more nitrogenous bacteria on a bigger filter. It'll be the same amount.
Yeah. Just maybe more aerated, so maybe it'll do it a little bit faster.
Maybe.
Just because I imagine it'll have a stronger filtration, stronger circulation. That's all.
Yeah, it's splitting hairs.
yeah. You're getting into the nitty gritty here.
But it's like snails, right? They're going to grow to the population where there's enough food available to them. If there's more food, they'll make more. If there's less food, then some of them will starve.
And these bacteria, their food is fish waste. So regardless of how much fish you have in the tank, it doesn't matter how big your filter is.
Right.
As long as it's big enough.
Yeah.
They're only going to produce a certain amount of ammonia to grow a certain amount of bacteria. Yep.
Nope, that was just the one that I wanted to have a rant on.
Is that what this one is about? Everybody's going off on their rant. I guess it is. That's kind of what we're doing tonight, isn't it?
A little bit.
We're
And I'll tell you another thing.
comedically ranting.
Yeah. I mean, we are cranking through these. We're at like 36 minutes right now. So
Maybe we'll just have... I did write
at a
down
clip.
extras just in case we had overlap, so maybe we'll have some bonuses.
Well, I don't mind. This is like kind of fast and dirty. We're getting a ton of information
I know,
here
yeah.
in like a really short amount of time.
I feel like this is like the infomercial like blurb
Yeah.
episode.
Please, if you want us to talk about any more of these, like send us a message and we'll do a whole episode on one of them.
Or, if you just want a YouTube video on it, let us know about that too.
True.
I'll happily carefully explain filtration issues in a tank. I was trying to find a nice way of saying bitching.
We knew, Charles.
All right. I think it's.
It's me, right?
Yes,
Oh,
it is.
yeah. Although we did take one of yours.
I'm used to that. I'm going to do a fun one. We're going to eye rolls here again. I want to do brackish water so I can practice for salt water.
Ooh. Yeah.
If you want to practice for salt water, just do salt water.
If you want to practice for saltwater, just do a simpler saltwater tank to start.
Well, I think that's kind of combining two of them because I also had the saltwater is hard as one of the myths. Saltwater is too hard.
I'm going to talk about that one a little later on, so we don't need to get to that one yet.
Yeah.
I can do that next.
I remember some of the stories that you have for that, so that's good.
Wait, didn't we? We've had like 3 questions on this podcast, and one of them was asking us to talk about brackish water. Is this person still listening to this podcast?
Maybe they gave up on us. I would argue brackish water is... This is a really difficult one to choose words on, but more difficult than saltwater.
I would word
don't
it
think
as...
It is.
I wouldn't say it's more difficult. I would say it's the most... It's the hardest as an individual to hone in on because there's the fewest number of people who have established how to do it.
Yeah.
So like with saltwater, there's thousands, tens of thousands of articles and forums and stuff on how to do it. And this is what I've done. This is what worked for me. How many people do you know are expert brackish keepers?
So I think you're all wrong.
With me, it's mainly about, like, there's not as much equipment. There's not as many established ways to do it. You're just sort of forging your own path.
I still think you're wrong.
You think that we're wrong?
I do. Yes. Brackish water is not saltwater light. Brackish water is not any harder than fresh water, which is not any harder than salt water. It's all the same. It all depends on what you want to keep in it. You can do a very simple, very easy saltwater tank. You can do a very simple, very easy freshwater tank. And you can do a very simple, very easy brackish water tank.
That's all true.
That's why I was trying to choose my words carefully.
Right.
It's more forging your own trail.
Because there's a lot less information out there on it.
Yeah, but there's all the information that you need. It's the same.
That's true.
You put some salt in, but not as much as you would for saltwater.
Well, this podcast exists because finding information is sometimes hard, Ben.
But even starting from there, right? You put in a certain amount of salt to make it. Okay, well, let me calculate what my salt content needs to be based on the 3 types of fish I want to keep and where they interseed. And then I'm going to get salt mix that's designed for a saltwater tank, measure that out in a certain amount. When a lot of salt mixes, you can just say, oh, it's a 1/4 cup. It's going to do seawater. You know, that's the sort of, you just got to think it through in a really different way to other aquariums.
Well, so brackish water, when it comes to getting the water right, is easy.
It's a little salty.
It's a little salty. And by the way, yes, that's all you need to know because it is such a dynamic environment. It's changing all the time. When I had my brackish tank, I used to do water changes And sometimes I do it with fresh water and sometimes with salt water, and my fish loved it.
Yeah, that inherently makes it a pain in the ass to me.
Okay, so then you could also just simply do it with half of what you use in a full saltwater tank. And keep, all right, so let me just go down this path there a little bit, right? So I'm saying that you can do it super easy. Bumblebee gobies, a sponge filter, regular rocks, and a little bit of salt in the water. That's a brackish water tank. Do your water changes. Don't care too much about how you measure the salt. Do a little bit in there every once in a while. By the way, the reason I say you don't have to care too much is because the tides change constantly in brackish water environments. Bringing in salt water as the moon goes one direction and pulling the salt water back and pushing the salt water back with fresh water when the moon goes the other direction, right? So it changes, and it changes rapidly, and the fish can handle that. You can also try to keep mud skippers, or you want to actually keep monos and scat. You need a 600-gallon aquarium and all of the necessary filtration that goes along with it. Whether you choose that to be proper freshwater filtration or proper saltwater filtration, it actually doesn't matter. Either one will be fine. Why is brackish water such a pain in the ass? Because most of the fish sold as brackish water fish get too damn big.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's the problem with brackish water. Archer fish get 12 inches long. Monos get 15 to 18 inches long. Scats can get up to 2 feet.
Yeah. And you can go down the line too, and it's like, well, there are freshwater archer fish, there are not scats and monos, but there are
Right.
some similar cool big fish that you can do.
A mono is basically an angelfish with less fins.
Yeah, there are dozens of species of freshwater puffer you can try. There are so many gobies, there are a couple of brackish rainbow fish. There's so many great alternatives. It's just so hard for me to see the argument for doing it.
Yeah. So I'm going to pop in right here real quick. This conversation is very interesting. I don't think it quite, we're circling around
We're
it.
circling
We
around
haven't
it.
actually talked about the misconception yet.
Yeah.
The misconception is that it's so where I was going with that misconception is I had saltwater is hard as one of my misconceptions, right? Brackish water as saltwater light. Freshwater is easier than saltwater.
Boo.
Well, a high-tech discus aquarium is a really challenging freshwater aquarium to keep. A couple of clownfish in a 20-gallon is a really easy saltwater aquarium to keep. Brackish water, you can make the same arguments for brackish water.
That Glosso tank downstairs, I'm pretty sure I spend more time on than
That's a lot of work.
than people spend on that 220 reef tank.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. The little 2-gallon nano coral tank that we just set up recently is not going to take much work. And it's gorgeous.
True. Yeah.
So that's, I don't know.
There we go. But that was the myth
That was
that I
such
was trying to break,
a
right?
derailed discussion.
I know, it was so good.
But it's anytime, I actually do like talking about brackish water tanks, and there are some brackish water fish that are cool, but I just don't think I'm ever going to get past it. I'm never going to want to do one.
Here's the
I
thing.
agree.
This is the moral of this misconception. You ready?
Yeah.
Set up the tank you want.
Yes.
Appropriate to the fish you want to keep.
Yep.
There you go. Don't set up a tank because you're like, oh, I want to, this is saltwater light, but I actually want to do saltwater.
Yeah.
You're not going to enjoy that tank.
Do a saltwater tank.
Yeah.
They're not that hard.
If it takes you a year longer to get the money or whatever to do what you want, it'll be worth it because this thing should be in your life for 5 or 10 years at least.
At least.
Yeah.
And it's a hobby. It's supposed to be fun. It's not like,
Gotta do the work.
yeah.
Yeah.
If it's not fun, you shouldn't be doing it. That's the thing.
I agree. All right. I think we're on you.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of pick up where you left off because
fun.
I have one that kind of falls under that. Saltwater is more difficult than freshwater that
Perfect.
you kind of hinted at.
Yeah.
And mine is reef aquariums are more complicated than planted aquariums. It's a conversation that Charles and I have been having a
Interesting.
lot lately, and I'd really like to have it in this context
Yeah.
because a planted aquarium requires a lot of guesswork.
Yeah, so she literally looked at me like 2 weeks ago, and this has been an ongoing conversation we've had since,
Yeah.
where she goes, you ever think about how like in a reef aquarium, the answer is always calcium, magnesium, alkalinity, and the answer is, do I have enough or not enough?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Whereas
Yeah.
with like Planet aquariums, it's like, do I have too much iron? Do I have not enough iron? Is it potassium? Is the
water too hard? Is the
Yeah.
water too soft?
This plant looks a little yellow. Internet tells me potassium deficiency, but I add potassium 3 times a week, so it's yellow. And in a reef
interesting.
aquarium, there are very strict rules you have to follow, or else everything's gonna die. And we talked a little bit about this with brackish, right? There are so many different environments, they're so variable, and it's similar in fresh water. Like, there are a lot of different environments that our plants come from. Chemistry's a little bit different, hardness, the types of minerals that are available are different. A reef environment is pretty consistent across the globe.
Unquestionably.
So if you can calculate those levels that you know your reef needs and you're doing your water changes and those levels are where they need to be, your corals are going to grow.
Yeah, like ever since she said that to me, I've been thinking about it, and I was like, dang, like that's so like, yeah. Like the more I thought about it, the more I was like it just completely blew me out of the water because I've been for like 2 weeks. I've been sitting on it, like yeah, that's it. Like the answers are so from a water chemistry perspective. Salt water is easier to work with.
We almost need to, and it's not definable, but you should almost start trying to look at. You have salt water, and you have different water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because,
Really?
Yeah, the water in Lake Nicaragua is completely different than the water in a swamp in Borneo, which is completely different than the water in the mountain in Borneo.
Yeah.
The water,
10 miles away.
Right. The water in the coral reef off the coast of Belize is comparatively identical to the water in Fiji. Now, it is slightly different, and there are some differences.
Yeah.
But comparatively, and for our intent and purpose, it's identical.
Yeah, like I'm going to get into the nitty gritty here a little bit, but like
That's why we keep your
working.
mouth, Charles.
And part of this conversation was instigated is that like, and this is why you were left out of it, was she was filming me while I was doing that calcium magnesium video series. And she like, when we were finished filming, I think part 2, that's when she said that to me. And I was like, and so I was like, yeah, like the Red Sea, for example, is a little bit saltier than the Indian Ocean outside of it. But that also means its magnesium, its calcium, and its alkalinity are all a little bit higher too, because there's a standard relationship there.
Right.
Like that stuff is...
Yeah, even if you're going to go for a quote-unquote Red Sea biotope, which you don't have to do, you can keep Red Sea organisms in a standard reef tank.
An orchid dottyback is a Red Sea organism, by the way, guys.
It would just mean doing the math and figuring out different numbers. But keeping those numbers is going to be fairly similar.
But if you kept it exactly the same as how you kept your Fiji stuff,
Yeah, it'd be fine.
it would be great.
Yeah.
But if you kept your discus numbers exactly the same as your Lake Malawi numbers, it would not go so well.
No.
And then try to go some Erio column in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be a disaster. So I would just love for people to flip that whole narrative of, just like we were talking about before.
Right.
Oh, you do fresh water until you graduate. Do the tank you want and figure out how to maintain it.
Well, that's kind of where I was hoping that part of that conversation would go because I remember you telling me a story recently of somebody who was fantastic at breeding all kinds of different fish and walked into saltwater and goes, "Oh, it looks too cool, but it's way too hard for me."
Like, are you kidding?
Didn't he breed discus?
Yeah, it was something like that where they were breeding rare soft water, or it might have been a pistos or something like that you do need to mess with the chemistry. And trying to soften or lower pH in freshwater is like one of the nightmares that I don't want to have to. I mean, you can do it, and it's definitely like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is intimidating, and if you get it wrong, you can kill things.
Yeah, the greatest example I have ever experienced in this hobby of like, it's all a matter of perspective, and that perspective is entirely based on your experience was, I cannot remember his name, but he came in and he is one of those hardcore Acropora SPS guys, and he offhand to me once said, "Yeah, I tried to keep a planet aquarium, too much work." And I was like, what?
He keeps acroporas in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I was like, that is the one coral that I'm like, man, that thing is so needy.
But I always tell people, like, in a planet tank, the plants will tell you long before they die, and they die slowly. Acroporas don't tell you. If you
They
get it
just
wrong,
die.
it's too late. They're dead. And you get your numbers right, and they don't die.
Yeah, and he was so tuned into doing that, though, that anything
Yeah.
outside of that was foreign to him. And that's the, like, for me, was the epitome of, like, man, like, maybe it's not as hard as we make it out to be. It's just different from the experience
just
I
different.
have.
That's it. I mean, that's what all of these questions of once we know the basics, right? We know how to do the nitrogen cycle, and we know who's not going to eat whom.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Once you know those two things, they're all different. A reef tank is different from a fish-only tank, and an Amazon River System tank is different than a Malawi tank. And you almost need to talk about an Amazon River System tank and a Malawi tank as differently as you talk about freshwater and saltwater. They're not harder.
They're just different.
They're just different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. Like a Lake Malawi tank and an Amazon tank are chemistry-wise just as different as to each other as either of them is to saltwater.
In fact, the Lake Malawi tank might be a little closer to saltwater than it is to the Amazon tank.
Probably true. Yeah. And a Lake Tanganyikan tank even closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Food for thought, everyone
I
listening.
know water is crazy. So don't assume just based. Listen, if somebody on the internet is keeping an amazing tank, they have a vested interest in showing how cool they are for how difficult it is. So come talk to us, and we'll tell you how difficult we think that is. Sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes it's nah. You just do this.
If anyone's wondering, from my personal opinion, I would rather maintain that 220 reef tank any day over that Glosso tank. It's just, A, I just like that look better, but B, it's less work.
Yeah.
And less
And
time.
from-
Let's put it that way. It's less time.
From
Yeah.
my perspective, I keep 5 planted tanks and I don't keep any saltwater tanks. But I still agree with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have something like in this theme?
Do you want to elaborate more on this one?
Well, I mean, there's
If
there's
it's
so many
relevant, just
layers.
go.
Yeah, and I had this really cool idea and then I forgot it. So we just,
Sorry, we distracted you. We should just let you go.
if I can get back to it, I will.
Okay.
'Cause, yeah.
All right.
You go.
Fluorescent Excel is a CO2 substitute.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back here because we did not harp on this enough after we found that out.
It is not a CO2 substitute. All right, Ben, what's your next one? No.
No,
I just
Charles,
remembered, so I wrote it down. So
Okay.
That's okay. No, this is good. This is a good.
This kind of does feed into mine because
Oh,
it's
good.
like, oh, we have this. Not my next one, my last one. It's like, oh, we have this mystery bottle that's supposed to help us with our planted tanks. What
Right.
does it do? I don't know. Kind of looks like CO2. Let's throw it in there.
Yeah, I think I was so happy because I couldn't quite articulate how I wanted to explain what Flourish Excel is and how it does until I was literally sitting down with you guys and filming that YouTube video. And Amy goes, Flourish Excel does not take the place of any other product. It takes the place of Flourish Excel. And I was like, yeah, because it doesn't do anything like any other product on the market that I know of. And it does what it's trying to do pretty well. So from a biochemical level, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't think anyone 100% knows exactly for sure what Flourish Excel does because the types of studies required to do that are stupidly expensive. And I think there are like 10 people in the entire world that could do it because it requires that specialized a skill
Wait,
set.
are you one of them?
No, I am not. Not even close. So there are a couple theories on how it works. Now, I'm probably biased in my opinion a little bit because the main, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce it here, active component in Flourish Excel, sorry, I blanked there for a second, is a isometric polymer of glutaraldehyde. And so a lot of
That's what I thought.
glutaraldehyde is a microorganism killer used in laboratory like settings. So I'm very familiar with that.
All right.
So a lot of people look at it and interpret it that maybe it might be used as a photosynthetic intermediary. That's the type of study that would be really expensive to do to prove that. I think what's happening, though, is that it's actually killing the microfilm of algae on the leaves of aquatic plants. And that means they are no longer competing for resources with those.
For the available carbon.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's and I was also really happy to have you filming for this because, again, this is why I like hanging out with you guys, because it helps me articulate ideas that I couldn't quite get. You said, I was like, it's not really a supplement. It's not really a like thing.
It's not a fertilizer.
Yeah, it's not a fertilizer. And then you said it's a treatment. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a treatment because what it's doing, it's getting rid of that film, removing competitor. It's not adding resources. It's just allowing your plants to more readily access resources that are already there.
And it does work.
Yeah, it definitely works. And that melds really well with our experience here of we have experimented a little bit and we're still doing that. By the way, I'm not sure Ben knows that. Me and Sally have been working on dosing Flourish Excel or doing like Excel baths on like Anubias to try to remove black brush algae.
Ooh, is it working?
With varying results. We're trying to hone in on what the right ratio is.
Oh, I love it.
Nice. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it's not an original idea for me. I will admit that. I got it on the internet, but no one could, everyone was like, theoretically it should be able to do this, but no one was able to go, but what's the ratio? So we're trying to figure that out.
That's really fun. I really like this one because it's specific, but it definitely is a common misconception.
Yeah.
And if you actually read that bottle, it doesn't say anywhere on there that's going to replace your CO2. It just...
It even says can be used in tandem with or without CO2.
Yeah. So that's an example of poor marketing for a cool product.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's having done the research for that video, I went into that being kind of like, okay, whatever. And afterwards I was like, no, this is a really cool product.
I was, I have a very good friend who's been doing planet aquariums much longer than I have. And she has amazing planet aquariums. She has a book. She's really good at what she does. She's definitely a celebrity in the planet aquarium hobby. And she hates Excel.
Yeah, because it's what'd she call it?
It's toxic.
She's correct, by the way.
Right.
That's why Flourish Excel is a isometric polymer. Sorry, because it makes it less toxic.
Got it.
Safe for me to handle as long as I don't, drink it or get it in my eye.
She was swinging my pendulum in that direction, like maybe we shouldn't be touting this stuff, guys.
Yeah.
And now I am totally on the it's not that it's a bad product; it's just an overused product.
Yeah.
Or a different product.
An inappropriately used product.
There's nothing wrong with it. It just is what it is. It's not a different thing.
Right.
Yeah. When used the way it was intended to be, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool. That was a good one.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so I'm revisiting it. I remembered exactly how I wanted to say what I was going to say, and I mentioned that I was going to combine the brackish is salt light with saltwater is too hard thing, and we kind of went down that direction, down that path a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the long-term dedicated hobbyists that I know.
Okay.
Even those grumpy old guys. Mm-hmm. Right?
I can picture him.
Oh yeah, these are the people that have been doing aquariums for their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
None of them that I know of do saltwater. Not one. Some have during their aquatic career.
Yeah.
They've been into it for a while. They go back to freshwater.
They usually dip their toes and either fail or get bored, I think.
Get bored is what it was. Yeah, all of them was get bored. Like I'm talking about the level of people that
breed 500 species of fish. Is this who we're talking about?
Breed 500
species of fish, or breed some of the. We're gonna go with bettas that changed the hobby. We know that guy.
Yeah.
He did an incredible reef take. He got bored with it.
By the way, we have some of his bettas in the store right now, guys.
They're so pretty.
They're so good.
Yeah. But my point with that one is that that when people come in here and say, like, we get, saltwater is just so cool. I just don't think.
Well, there's just so many more fish and so much brighter color and so much.
By the way, I think there's 8 times or 10 times, no, more than that, more species of freshwater fish than saltwater fish. Way, way, way more species of freshwater fish than saltwater fish on the planet.
I don't know about that math, but I do know for sure in the hobby that it's like 100 to 1. It's like ridiculous.
Oh, easily.
Like there's not it's no contest.
Yeah. We need to find out what that math is, what that the number of saltwater fish versus species.
It would be like almost impossible because we would have to put a little asterisk on saltwater and say aquarium appropriate.
Well, you're right, but even just total.
Total, I would like to know, but I think it gets even smaller when you talk about the fish that can go in aquariums.
I think there's a member of our studio audience that might be Googling it as we speak.
I can't speak on a global level, but I can say for sure
in the hobby,
and the Amazon River Basin, not South America, the Amazon River Basin has more species of fish than the entire Atlantic Ocean.
That sounds right.
So if that carried over onto a global level, that makes sense to me.
I think it continues. It
has to, because there are so many microhabitats in freshwater.
Well, it's just what we were saying before, right? For each one of those different environments we were talking about, they all have at least one fish that would fit it. Whereas for saltwater, those are similar environments. There are so many niches.
There are 850 different species, 850 and counting, different species of fish just in Lake Malawi.
There's
Insanity.
800 species of Lake Pleco and counting. They're finding them so fast that they can't scientifically describe them as fast as they're finding them.
Right.
So what's the misconception?
The misconception is saltwater's harder. That's it. Saltwater's not harder. It's different. It goes right back. I mean, we had the discussion, and that's the discussion, and that's the place to take people when they start having those kinds of thoughts. The one thing that I will say, saltwater, on average, is more expensive.
I will never sugarcoat that. I 100% believe that's true.
It's true. Plan on it. But I want a clownfish. It's going to cost you more than having a guppy. Period.
But it's not harder.
It's not harder.
And if you're going to establish a reef, it should, it should be set up for at least 5 to 10 years. I don't feel that way about every freshwater tank.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It's pretty easy to just throw up or tear down a freshwater tank. So, to invest in the long-term success of this thing that you want.
You are taking on a pet that can live for 25 to 30 years. Yeah. That's how long clownfish live, by the way, 25 years. We have a customer that comes in the store. They have a pair of clownfish. That pair of clownfish is 21 years old.
That's amazing. I think this one is a misconception on both sides. It's like people who are new to it thinking, oh, there's so much more to do in saltwater. And then people who have been into it for a long time saying, oh, there's so much more to do in freshwater. But you can still specialize, and you can still have a favorite organism, and you can still attempt breeding. And people are just throwing up the most boring mixed reef they can think of and getting bored with it. Don't be surprised when you set up a 75-gallon mixed reef and within 5 years you're like, yeah, it's full.
Right.
Because it is.
You can't do anything with it anymore.
God, Amy, you're just full of honesty today.
Yeah, I'm not pulling punches today.
Okay, so I want to continue this rant on a little bit just because it's very related. It's not on my list, but now you've touched the chord and I want to pluck it hard.
Yeah.
Saltwater fish are more colorful than freshwater fish.
We get that one a lot.
We get that one every day.
I have 2 words for you. Nothobranchius rockovia.
I have many words for you, but I'm not going to share them.
I can't share them in mixed company.
Yeah. Come into the store and look at the Nothobranchius, and I should have just said one word.
Notho.
Yeah.
Notho. Right? Or look at those clown killies. I mean,
or freaking neon tetras.
Anything.
That's true.
It's
come on.
There's
What's wrong with that?
There is so many more options in freshwater, and there's so many different colors. I once had a conversation with Ken, not Ben, Ken, just so anyone's listening. Ken.
One of our seasonal workers.
Yes. He said, can you imagine if saltwater fish had the like vibrant colors that they have, but the patterns of freshwater fish. Because saltwater fish don't normally have the ridiculous patterns that freshwater fish. There are some out there.
So I'm going to counter your argument
Yeah.
with one example. And I'm going to say, I'm going to get slammed for this. The most beautiful fish.
I know where you're going.
I know, right? I'm such an ass for doing it. Is a saltwater fish. The number one.
All
Like,
right.
if you're going to
all
line them
right.
all up, like we're going just an inch above. But, and by the way, has an incredible pattern.
All right.
Go for
An
it.
outstanding pattern.
Just say it.
The Mandarin Dragonette.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
argue
yeah.
it's a saltwater fish with a freshwater pattern, though.
But it's not fresh water, sorry.
I don't
true.
know. Ben has been notoriously on record saying he doesn't like the pajama cardinal because it looks like a freshwater fish, so he's getting called
Because
out.
it looks like a tetra.
I mean,
say a tetra.
he's right,
not,
though.
He's not wrong. If I could tell him he was wrong, it would be a better point, but damn it, I'm going to bring up anyway.
So anyways, there's a lot more to do in freshwater, though. And there are
Yeah.
so
There
many
is.
colors. And I think a lot of people get a false perception that freshwater fish aren't colorful. And because most of the fish we have for sale in freshwater department are juveniles.
Yeah.
Yeah, or stressed recent shipments.
Yeah. Or like color for fish is a way of advertising how sexy you are. If you can't play that game, you're not going to waste time and energy advertising. So like a lot of the fish that I sell now are going to be gray, brown. In a few months, they're going to be fluorescent orange or blue or like those Rohanai barbs. Those are going to look ridiculous in a year.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a fish that evolves over the course of like 5 years. That's like you get to have like 5 different fish just with that one fish just over time.
It's so cool to walk up to a freshwater aquarium with a good group of fish that are mature.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
It's so rare in fish stores that it skews the whole hobby towards saltwater is prettier.
Right. Right.
And it's just like, and that's why I'm such a strong advocate of know what you're looking for, because like I understand the appeal of finding something because I still do that.
Yeah.
Like that's how I ended up with a blue striped clownfish tank. Like I understand how that happens. But also when you know what you're looking for, you know what you're going to have in a year
Yeah.
or in 3 months in some cases,
Right.
because what you bring home is probably not what you're going to have.
They're going to change. They're
Yeah.
going to mature and they're going to look better.
Yeah, my boring gray fish that hit all the time that I bought 3 years ago now are purple with red polka dots, and they greet me every time I come up to the tank. Like, it's just, that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different fish after it spent time in your tank. That's all.
So wait, we're slamming saltwater a little too much here.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, but the whole point of it all is that we shouldn't be a competition. It's so much fun no matter
Yeah.
where you're at.
If you want a saltwater tank, have a saltwater tank. If you
Right.
want to do a freshwater tank, do a freshwater
yeah.
tank.
If
Don't
you
tell
want
me
to
one is
breed,
cooler
it's
than the other,
probably
because I'll tell you why
freshwater.
you're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's I love to say I don't discriminate based on salinity. I have saltwater and
Yeah.
freshwater tanks because I like both.
You're going to mention breeding.
Well, I mean, if you're going to breed, if breeding is your goal, you're probably going to stick with freshwater, and that makes sense. Or if you want, then research and do the saltwater
If
one.
you want to break ground,
Yeah. Like,
breed
Yeah.
saltwater fish.
yeah, definitely. Oh, I would
we need
love
saltwater
to see,
breeders more than ever.
like some of our master breeders from the club, if they would tackle a couple of, like, I would love to see one of them just dedicate a year to a dwarf angel.
Yeah.
Please.
If you're listening,
Please.
I 100% believe in you. I know you can do it. Please, we need people like you to do that because you have the skill set. I fully believe
Yeah,
that.
it's not about the skill. It's literally about time
The
and equipment.
dedication.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have it.
You have it. Anybody who's listening, honestly, probably could do it if they dedicated enough time and energy.
I'm actually thinking of 3 people. I'm not going to name them, but 3 members of the local aquarium club that I just right now. Yeah, those 3 guys. If you guys are listening, dude, were you talking about me?
Probably.
If you're thinking that I probably was, but come in and we'll talk.
Please.
I'll let you know.
All right.
Yeah.
That was a big discussion.
Where were we? I got lost.
I don't know.
Who was?
Is
Who,
it?
who just? What? Were
I
you
think
talking
it was your point of saltwater is
saltwater. That's right. Okay.
Okay.
That was my saltwater.
All right.
What's harder, saltwater or
So
freshwater?
it's-
that one needed to be harped on though.
Yeah. That was probably the whole biggest takeaway from this. But
I think you're right.
I've got a good short and sweet one for me to end my list on.
Okay.
And I think that this goes out to pretty much everybody, and everyone who has a tank needs to hear this right now. My last misconception is healthy aquariums always look photo ready. As in,
Right.
I have so many people who come in with pictures of their tanks and want to apologize for it. Oh, this looks overgrown, or this plant is just kind of wilting right now. And I want you to know that when I look at the comments of judging on big planted tank competitions, even in that, when those tanks look amazing, they still criticize, you should have taken this photo 3 days later. You just trimmed your plants, they've got to grow in a little bit more, or there's this little thing that was just out of place that you should have trimmed back an inch or two, and people spend literally hours and hours before taking those pictures. They get the light exactly correct, they get the fish in the exact correct location. Even after preparing for the photo, they spend hours taking the photo. And
They
that's
take 100.
and that probably goes for just about every Instagram post you see too.
What?
So your tank looks fine. If it's healthy, it is what it is. You can always trim it back or move things around to get it to look the way that you want to. But nobody's aquarium looks like that all the time.
Yeah.
Nobody's.
And
No.
here's the thing. I don't think anyone's should always look that way.
Right.
Because that much effort into doing that makes it, to me, they're gorgeous pieces of art.
Yeah.
They're amazing. I am not diminishing that. What's the word I'm looking for here? That magnitude of effort, because damn, is it gorgeous. But
It pays off.
But you are maintaining a living system. Those photographs are snapshots of a moment in time.
Yeah.
Of when everything is lined up, the stars are aligned, you've carefully articulated everything so that everything is at its ideal peak when you took that photo. Are you firing?
I think our store is a perfect example of that, because our displays, okay, they always look pretty darn good, but they don't always look perfect. And there are people that are paid here to take care of the aquariums, right?
Yeah.
And they do a fantastic job. And this is by no means, by the way, many of them are listening right now.
They're like,
By
they're
no
watching you.
means a criticism of the job done on keeping these tanks looking as perfect as possible. But they don't always look perfect. And that's okay.
Yeah.
They always
Otherwise,
look amazing.
like if
not-
you were to keep
not always
that
perfect.
Glosso tank, for example, looking absolutely perfect at all times, I think it would mean every 3 days trimming. And
Probably.
that wouldn't make it look perfect. That would make it look like you're trimming it every 3 days. It would always have
Right.
those dead ends and stuff like that. So you can't even, to keep it photo ready, you can't even just trim it and then take a picture. You've got to trim it and then wait and then hope that everything grows in the way that you want it to. But if it doesn't, then trim it again and then wait another 3 days and then you take the picture.
I feel like I even look better 3 days after I get a haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your tank is not supposed to look like that all the time, and don't think that it is.
Yeah. And don't apologize
one.
to me about your tank when you're showing it to me. I'm
Yeah.
going to be excited.
Unless you have a 10-inch Oscar and a 10-gallon tank.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for this grouping of plants that's growing a little too tall. I just want to know that your stuff is healthy,
Yeah.
and if it is, then it
And
will
that you're
look
having fun.
it will look the way you want it to eventually when you're ready.
Or here's a great example of the idea that you're talking about. I have a customer that comes in about every other Sunday, and he always shows me how much his agrophilia has grown since the last time he came in. Anyone who would look at those photos would probably think it looks overgrown because it's taking up X amount of his tank.
Mm-hmm.
That plant looks amazing though. That is he does such a good job keeping that plant happy. And so it's like,
Yeah.
Like, it's not, if you're looking at it from only the lens of it has to fit this like aquascape perfectly, it's wrong. But the plant is so healthy that it's like,
that's like our crinum and the criminations we have in our 100-gallon tank up front. That is a tank that it's so ready to be taken down. We need to take that down and turn it into something that's going to encourage and excite people about different plants and different aquascapes so that we can use that to market and sell more stuff and make other people happy. But that crinum natans that's in there, I've had it for like 10 years.
And
like
it's
6
happy.
feet long, and it's so cool.
How do you make that plant
I can't
sad?
take it. That's healthy. It's happy.
yeah. So
Yeah.
photo ready does not necessarily mean unhealthy.
Never apologize.
Yeah. And I guarantee any aquascaping time lapse you see on Instagram took at least a whole day, if not several.
Yeah.
So
One of our good friends, one of our good watercolors aquarium friends, is a professional aquascaper who has entered many of the international aquascapes and done really well in them. And he keeps his tank up for 6 months, and that's it. 6 months, and then he takes it down and does another one.
Mm-hmm. And 6 months is usually the period where I tell people your tank is starting to stabilize.
Yeah, yeah. And when he gets that close to photo time, he's spending 3 to 4 hours every 2 days on it to perfect it.
God.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It
That's just
photo perfect.
That's just so like bone chillingly dedicated.
Yeah. And
But,
that's
I mean,
why
that's-
he's a master.
That's
Yeah.
the level of an Olympic athlete or
Yeah.
a superstar. I mean, that's
And
what
There-
he's going for.
if
But
you
there's
want
a reason
that,
I'm not an Olympic athlete, and there's a reason why I'm not a master. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. If
Yeah.
you want that, then do that. And it will take you plenty of time to practice becoming that person. But guess what? You don't need to for your single 20-gallon aquarium.
Healthy, happy aquariums.
That's enough.
Yep.
All right.
speaking of healthy, happy, I got one. Brine shrimp have 0 nutritional value.
Oh, that's a like roller coaster,
Yeah.
right?
Like that one is all over the board. So I'm not quite sure where I want to start off first, but I think I'll start off with, so what is the staple food for saltwater tanks? This isn't a trick question, by the way.
Okay.
I just want you to answer it.
You mean like frozen food?
Yes.
Okay.
Mysis shrimp,
Yeah. Do you know why?
because they're easy and full of protein.
That's true. But you know what else is?
What is?
Brine shrimp. But I'm not going to argue that brine shrimp should be a staple for... I'm just trying to make a point here.
Okay.
Nutritionally, they're very simple,
Right.
similar. But mysis in this particular case, and this is why it's not a perfect example, mysis has far more highly unsaturated fatty acids, which marine fish need.
Right.
So when you're looking at like people that say, I'll never feed my saltwater fish brine shrimp, I'm like, well, why? They make a great treat. They're great for getting saltwater fish graduated to mysis shrimp.
Do you tell them that brine shrimp are actually a saltwater species and mysis shrimp are a freshwater species?
Yeah. Not always, but yeah.
Sometimes they just go,
What? But I would argue that I think that brine shrimp is probably the best staple frozen food for freshwater fish. I can see really good arguments for other things like bloodworms, but I think that for most fish, and I'm speaking for like most, I'm going to hate myself for saying that.
right, I'm
Most
ready to like,
community freshwater
I'm
fish.
poking all kinds of holes in that.
Most community freshwater fish, a brine shrimp is going to be the best catch-all shotgun. If you're doing only one frozen food, that's going to probably be your best option because it can hit the most boxes.
Okay, you're right if you're doing only one frozen food, but I don't know that there is a tank out there, unless it's a fish that is a strict insectivore, that should only be fed frozen brine shrimp.
Yeah, but most people aren't. That's why I'm
Wait.
just using
As
it
a
as an
supplement.
example.
Hang
As a
on.
supplement.
Yeah, can we just make it very clear at this point that we're talking about as an addition to a fully complete prepared food like a
Right.
pellet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just I'm using extreme examples only because I will literally get people in that say that it's useless to their fish. And I'm like,
Right.
no, like
No,
that's
it's
not, that's not it.
Yeah.
It's a great supplement into saltwater fish diet. It's a great supplement. It's amazing for freshwater fish. Like all my breeders get brine shrimp.
Right.
Just because it's got that just protein boost that is really good for just getting them in the mood. It's just really, I don't know. I think that everyone that's trying to breed freshwater and most people trying to breed saltwater should have brine shrimp in their arsenal.
I don't disagree. 100%. Yeah.
It's just a food that has weird mythical status and weird like things that people say about it that I'm like, okay, well, that's not how that works. But
So I actually know where a lot of this myth is perpetuated. Right? So newly hatched baby brine shrimp have tons of really good nutritional value to them. And when you read some of the classic literature on breeding shrimp, they almost refer to it as the next necessary step in raising baby fish, right? Like, so first you do this, then you add your BBS, baby brine shrimp, right?
Yep.
Like as in, of course you have that because you're
Yeah.
breeding fish, right? And they're exactly right that for raising many, many species of baby fish, from angelfish to discus to tetras, it's and marine fish, clownfish. You need many of the literature talks about that as being a necessary step with feeding baby brine shrimp to get them to the next step. And if you do that, you will have fantastic results. If you do that while the baby brine shrimp are relatively young. Baby brine shrimp, after about 4 or 5 days, will still survive but have lost most of their nutritional value.
they lose most of it in like 36 hours. It's
3 days.
stupidly fast.
It's crazy fast, right? Newly hatched baby brine shrimp are fantastically nutritionally valuable.
So people have extrapolated that into, well,
Right.
if that's true, that must extend all the way into
All
the
the way
adult
into their
state.
adulthood, right? As you raise brine shrimp and grow them up
And feed them.
and feed them nutritional stuff.
Wait, food? Grass-fed beef is better than...
You are what you eat. My mothers were right.
It's just like, I would fully argue, and I'm willing to, if you're buying a bag of live adult brine shrimp, that's nutritionally less sound than frozen brine shrimp, because
Yeah.
the live brine shrimp haven't eaten for so long that they're burning through all of their resources that would be good for your fish. Frozen brine shrimp aren't doing that.
Right.
They were...
That's a good one, Charles. I like what you did there.
Yeah, I like the more specific ones too. It's
Yeah.
like anyone who believes that is called out now.
I want you to
Good.
know.
That's good. I think it does come down to we talked about there's no universal freshwater.
Yeah.
There's no universal food.
No.
No. Yeah. That's a struggle for me a lot, where
Yeah.
a lot of people are like, so what if I do just one food? And I'm like, oh God.
Guess what? I do not own any frozen foods right now.
I don't either.
I don't. I've got 4 tanks. I have a puffer in one of my tanks. I don't own any frozen food right now. But they get different blends, and a lot of my fish are also able to eat some veggie.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I aim my tanks, because I do not like dealing with any foods that I can't just dump in there.
See,
Same way.
I'm the exact opposite
No.
of you guys. I have a different frozen food for every day of the week.
That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. Maybe I should bring home some brine shrimp.
I'm gonna wrap us up with. See, I should have done this one earlier because it's a little bit boring, but it's also one that we got to talk about.
Oh, okay.
So, algae is a problem.
It does go a little bit with the snails one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I love this one, and I
Right.
can't believe I didn't put it on even as a reserve.
I'm even gonna go cyanobacteria, not an algae. I have a problem with cyanobacteria.
Well, you have a problem, but it's
do have
not
a
with
problem. It's not
cyanobacteria.
Yeah. What's my big statement there? Algae and cyanobacteria are not problems. They are symptoms of problems. That's why I don't like algae killers. They don't address the problem.
Yeah.
Don't ever use an algae killer.
They often add to the problem because a lot of new dead stuff, they will kill algae.
They will.
And a lot of new dead stuff in your tank is great food for algae.
For algae.
Have you guys ever looked into the concept of like fires in grasslands? Like that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
You're just letting the new grass come in.
What Charles was alluding to there was a lot of the grassland ecosystems in the world actually depend on fire to replenish themselves. In fact, there are seeds that need fire to germinate. Most of them are actually in forests, but there are grassland seeds as well. They need fire. They won't germinate unless there's fire because they need the fire to put the nutrients back in the system, i.e. they need something to kill off the algae that puts the nutrients back in the system that'll put the nutrients back in to grow more algae.
Yeah.
The reason I say algae is not a problem, it is a symptom of a problem, is because unless you address what is causing the algae growth, you are never going to solve the unsightliness of the algae you're trying to get rid of.
Yeah, I would word it as it's kind of an equilibrium. Like any
exactly.
tank has a healthy amount of algae. I don't think zero algae is good for a tank, but I also don't think all the algae is good for your tank either.
I would even say that if you have a tank with a bunch of algae growth, it's a good thing that algae is growing because it's handling some of the nutrients that would be poisoning your fish.
Yeah. Algae thrives and in nature takes over in fringe environments.
Yeah.
If algae is
Love that
taking
term. I think
over
it's great.
in your tank, you've made your tank into a fringe environment.
Right.
It's that equilibrium bell curve, guys.
Algae growth is a symptom of an imbalance with light and nutrients. Always. As a scientist, I just use the word always. And I meant it. I'm sticking to it.
I would say algae problems.
No, I'm sticking with algae.
You're going to have algae. I guess algae is always going to take whatever's excess, but it's natural to have a little bit of excess.
Unwanted algae growth is the result of an imbalance in light and nutrients.
Yeah, I want to harp on this a little bit, please.
Yes, harp away.
So the best counter to algal growth in any system is good growth in something else. So in a freshwater tank, that's plants.
Right.
The best counter to algal growth is good plant growth.
Right.
The best counter to algal growth in a reef tank is good coral growth.
Right.
Because they're competing for a lot of the same resources. But what you're doing is you're skewing who's more competitive in what environment. So if Amy mentioned a fringe habitat. In a fringe habitat, algae is more competitive.
Right.
So if you skew yourself away from a fringe habitat, plants are more competitive, and now the algae doesn't do so well. In a coral reef, it's the same way. If you skew away from a fringe habitat, your corals can take those resources, and now they're no longer available for algae.
Yeah, and we're talking about environments where light hits 12 hours a day, or there's a ton of nutrients that are caught there and not enough circulation. And we're talking about those types of little places along, whereas a reef, there's tons of flow and there's so much oxygenation, or like an area where plants are going to occur in great numbers is super crystal clear, and they're getting the right amount of light per day.
It's amazing how little algae there is on a healthy coral reef.
Yeah.
That was a conversation that we were having with one of your friends earlier. He's like, I never had someone had to articulate it to me that yeah, corals need nutrients too. Zero nutrients is actually bad.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even acropora keepers know that.
That's why it's called low nutrient system, guys, not no nutrient system.
So we talked a lot about how nutrients can be the issue for algae growth. and problems in the system. But light is another one that, sometimes people don't think about that. All this great filtration and you do all your water changes and my nutrients in the system are really low, but I'm still getting algae growth. Well, plants need rest. Plants can only photosynthesize for a specific amount of time. During that specific amount of time, they're using up the nutrients that algae could otherwise use. They're going to photosynthesize until they're ready to sleep.
And I think
And that doesn't necessarily mean the lights go out.
I think that's like 4 hours because they take a couple to wake up and they take a couple to sort of close up at the end of the night.
I had always heard like around 6, but
Yeah,
probably,
it's
probably one of those that like depends on the plant.
Yeah, it's not like a full photo period though. If you've got your lights on for 8 hours, they're not photosynthesizing that entire time.
No.
Yeah.
But 8 is they're definitely not photosynthesizing it after 8 hours.
Yeah.
They're done. And if the light is still there, that's energy going into your system, and the nutrients are still there, something is going to take advantage of that energy and of those nutrients. It is not going to be wasted.
Yeah.
Wait, so are you saying that there's a point where everything wants to stop eating?
Even me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question of like, okay, I've got a lot of algae growth, and you're like, all right, how long are your lights on per day? And you're like, they have to think for a second. Well, when I get up, I could almost stop them there.
Yeah.
If you're turning on your lights when you get up and turning them off when you go to bed, they are on way too long. Way too long.
Way too long. That's where the algae is coming from.
Put it on a timer. They're so cheap. It's so easy. Set it for when you're going to be home.
Yep. $11.99.
Yeah.
Solve it.
Solve the problem.
Yep.
Or like the 2 hours on, 2 hours off. I'm going to turn it on, turn it off. Plants can't use that. Algae might be able to.
I think, and this is actually a fair analogy. Try this. At 11 o'clock tonight, or whatever time you usually go to bed, but set your alarm for 2 hours later. And then get up for 2 hours. And then...
And try to force yourself to have a huge sandwich.
Right. But do this on a weekend so that you can keep that 2 hours on, 2 hours off, like for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And see how you feel after it.
Yeah.
By the way, your plants are going to feel the same way.
I can tell you as a person who's done many a road trip, it's not fun.
It's not fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the best way to pull off a road trip. It doesn't mean you're going to feel good the next day.
No.
And let's do it for one night and not weeks and years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. We did just do that whole algae control podcast, so hopefully they learned some of the lessons from that.
All right,
We'll
so
see.
I need to hear from you guys on this one big time because we constantly have like wind down sessions in the back room after a day where we talk about somebody came in and said this. Have you ever heard that before?
Too
So
often.
That's kind of what we were addressing tonight was some of those. I can't believe that this is what somebody thought.
Where did that come from?
Right. So please tell us some of the misconceptions that you've had or you've heard of where maybe you overheard, like when I was 4 years old, I thought a whale was a fish, right? What have you guys heard about misconceptions about aquariums? What are some of those things that give us some fun stories?
Yeah, and search yourself for your own too. Like Charles and I, maybe you should tell us what our misconceptions are on brackish water tanks because we went off on them a little bit earlier.
Did, yeah.
So please tell us how
Brackish.
we're wrong.
I was like, brackish sucks. There, it's in the notepad.
So please tell us how we're wrong too.
Yep. We're gonna probably do some little offshoot YouTube videos
Ow.
on some of these and some Facebook posts. So
We'll definitely make a Facebook post for this episode. So we'll probably concentrate most of the discussion there, but please rate and review us on iTunes as well because that lets us know how many of you are listening.
I want to do a short little YouTube video on this just so we can get some feedback because I love these misconceptions. They're so
They're
much
so
fun.
If we've said anything in this podcast that you disagree with, what is it? Watercolors at Aquarium.
Oh, you can pretty
Bottles
much
at watercolors.
Yeah, you can you do podcasts at watercolorsaquariumgallery.com. That way I'll know where you're coming from and I will definitely send any negative opinions and thoughts to Charles.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you guys had a lot of fun with this one. I know we did, because after all, that's what we're all about here, is trying to keep this fun. Thank you so much for listening, and let's keep those hands wet.